Hello, everyone. My name is Joanne Lockwood, and I am your host for the Inclusion Bites podcast. In this series, I will be interviewing a number of amazing people and simply having a conversation about the subject of inclusion, belonging, and generally making the world a better place for everyone to thrive. If you'd like to join me in the future, then please do drop me a line to joe.lockwood@seechangehappen.co.uk. That's SEE changehappen.co.uk. You'll be able to catch up with all of the previous shows on iTunes, Spotify, and the usual places. So plug in your headphones, grab a decaf, and let's get going. Today is episode 26, with the title, Me, My Hormones and I. And I have the absolute honour and privilege to be joined by Lauren Chiron. Lauren describes herself as an executive coach and menopause at work specialist. When I asked Lauren to describe her superpower, she said, tenacity, getting shit done, especially those things that others barely talk about. Hello, Lauren.
Hi,
Welcome
Joe.
to the show.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, no, really well, thank you. It's really great to catch up.
Fantastic. So, Lauren, Me, My Hormones and I, what's that about? Tell us.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, to me, it was quite interesting. I would like to take you back to the 5th of November, 2014. I was called into a meeting with my boss, which in itself was quite unusual because normally we caught up in between meetings on the way in and out of work. And I was also quite excited because it was my birthday. So I thought he had something in store for me. However, I wasn't prepared for the surprise that he did deliver when I went into his office. The conversation, which I shall abbreviate for you, went along the lines of, you're walking around this place as if you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's not exactly becoming of a female leader in this organisation. And you were happier when you did that personal trainer thing you used to do, so perhaps you ought to have a think about that. Well, let me tell you, whatever self-esteem or self-confidence I had before that meeting was down in a dark, dark place by the time I stepped out. And I knew I had to go and get some space between myself and the office, and I worked from home for a little while. I took my son on holiday for a few days, and during that holiday, I laughed, joked, sang, built snow castles and igloos, had an absolute ball with my 8-year-old. We're in Iceland and slept like a log every night. On the last night of the holiday, as he fell asleep, I sat bolt upright in my bed and burst into tears. It suddenly dawned on me what my boss was trying to tell me. He was basically saying that I was a shadow of my former self, that I wasn't behaving in a way that he was used to. And when I looked back, I realised I hadn't slept for 18 months. I was exhausted. I was kind of wired and tired at the same time all day, every day. I was working longer and harder. I was training really hard for a marathon. I was doing a full-time job with teams in America, India, and the UK. I delivered regulatory change projects for financial services, and I thrived in my work. But I was finding I'd be sitting in a meeting and, planning. Planning's fundamental to what I do, right? But I'd sit in a meeting and I'd choose 15 different sentences to describe the word plan because I couldn't get it out of my head. And my memory was shot. I couldn't recall names. I couldn't remember which meeting I had to be in and when. I had self-esteem issues. I had palpitations, anxiety attacks, all sorts of things. And I just thought I had completely lost it. So ultimately, I left my job thinking I had early onset dementia in my early 40s. So you can imagine my surprise when my GP told me I had just been through an early menopause. I was basically the happiest menopausal woman in Bristol. And literally in that moment, I knew what I had to do. And that was to make sure no other employer lost their talent because of lack of understanding of a natural life stage. And no other woman could blindly walk into perimenopause and menopause without knowing what was going on. So that's kind of where it all started for me, Joe.
Wow, that's a story. And this company you're working for 6 years ago wasn't a small company. It was a big multinational organisation, wasn't it? So it was
a large organisation.
Yeah.
And I think back then organisations were not menopause savvy, were not menopause aware. It wasn't something that was on the agenda. So I don't, there's nothing about size of organization, or I think it's just we're living in very fast moving and changing times. And it's been great to, have on my books brilliant organizations now that are looking to make significant change and are really waking up the fact that there are more women in work now than ever before. We're working longer and later in our lives and holding more senior roles. So we really need to change the landscape that we work in.
So you're looking back and you're not casting any blame. It was just contextually at that time, 6 years ago, that was the way of the world. People didn't talk about it. It wasn't, you were being treated less fairly. Just they were quite right almost in their observation that you weren't the person you used to be.
Absolutely. I think it was quite interesting that someone who's supposedly leading other people, bright, intelligent, etc., capable, I'd had an award and my bonus the week before. So all the signals were that things were going well. So that conversation really was like a bolt out of the blue for me, but it was odd, to not know what you're going through. And just to put that into context, I had my son just before I was 38, and I was on the contraceptive pill that meant I didn't have a monthly cycle. So I had no idea that my period had stopped. So I didn't know what to look out for. I hadn't had the conversation with my mum. I didn't have anyone else around me, late 30s, early 40s going through peri or menopause. I didn't even know what perimenopause was. So, as an employee, you've got a responsibility to look out for yourself and be on top form, doing everything that you can to make sure that you're fit for work. And I believe an employer has got a responsibility to create the culture and the environment that is entirely inclusive and that you can bring as much of yourself to work as is appropriate. So, yeah.
For sure, I completely agree. And the last 6 years, the world of work has come a long way in that respect, doesn't it? We wind the clock back that far, then many employers hadn't even thought about this, well, being inclusive. Inclusion, belonging, diversity wasn't really on the top of most agendas. It was business as usual, get stuff done, and being nice to people wasn't really on the agendas, really.
No, I think I've been I'm on career number 4, and I've been very fortunate to always do work that I've loved. However, I never had any challenges with monthly cycles. I never had any challenges when I wanted to get pregnant, getting pregnant. I did have a tricky pregnancy because I was offered termination at 6 months. And that meant that there was a lot of stress around the continuation. And just for context, my son is now 14 and a big strapping lad, although he's got underlying medical conditions. The Children's Hospital in Bristol is our safe place, and that's been amazing. However, even when I was working, if he was critically ill and I was by his bedside in the hospital, I still had my laptop on doing my meetings. I never took my foot off the pedal. I didn't think because I was a mum or my son was ill. Now, was that the business creating that culture, or was that me putting the pressure on myself? That's a debate that I think we could probably spend hours on. However, the whole menopause thing coming along just knocked me sideways. I nearly passed out twice in the office. It was bizarre, really bizarre.
So you said that you're putting pressure on yourself to work all these hours to deliver the projects and be a full-time mum and all the other things that went around being you. You said you're not sure whether that was you putting extra pressure, or that was were you in this kind of working like a man type environment where you wanted to feel like you were succeeding and keeping up? You felt like you had to be that person, or was it a personal thing?
So that's a really interesting expression, right? Because working like a man, I've never ever had that phrase go through my head in my life. I started going out to work with my dad when I was 4. He had properties. We'd go around and empty the telephone boxes of the 2p's and the pennies. He'd collect the rent, and we'd spend a Sunday, counting it out. And he had another company doing contract cleaning. So I would help him with staff wages on a Sunday, and I've always just worked. It's just something, it was a fun thing I did with my dad. I never considered it to be something masculine. And interestingly, the sports I've done, like judo or football, a lot of what I've done, I've always moved in very male-dominated environments. So I've never questioned it. And the same with the jobs I've done. They've always been traditionally very male. And because I was very fortunate not to have any situations arise up until my early 40s where I saw the difference myself, I never questioned it. But it was only in hindsight, which is always great, right? Where I suddenly went, it was only because of my hormones that my behavior changed. But because I wasn't aware of it, I couldn't manage it, and I couldn't take control and make sure that I went on that journey with my eyes wide open and helped get the right help and support from the people around me to continue doing that. I didn't stop being bright, intelligent, or capable. Well, it felt like I had, but I didn't lose those skills, knowledge, and experience, right? So it was just about, how do you change that masculine environment that women tended to step into around about the Second World War, when we started really entering the workforce en masse. How do you change that which we've stepped into and kind of worn the mask or molded ourselves into what was there, rather than trying to change it, which is what I think we're doing now.
Because it's interesting also, when you're talking at the beginning, you said your managers said to you, not becoming of a female leader in our organization. So a female leader in our organization, why not just a leader in our organization? So was that almost the fact that your manager was seeing you as a woman rather than just as a leader?
Yeah, I'm not sure. The memory plays tricks with you, right? So I wonder if the more conscious I'm becoming of the differences of being a female is my recollection, or whether it was just the fact that there was a passing comment about being a leader in the organization. So I don't know if I would want to dwell on that too much.
Okay, but you're now more hyper aware of your own sense of self and reflected back on that time, and almost like analyzing some of your behavior with hindsight and wondering whether these things came into play.
Yeah, and I think specifically because I was a sole parent with a child with medical needs, I think that also made me think twice about ever considering taking time off, or, if I wanted to go and watch something at school, or if my son was poorly, how did I make sure that I was A, there for work, and B, there for him, which on reflection, I'm afraid I don't agree with. However, that was my choice at the time, but I was too afraid, I had too fixed a mask on to consider ever turning around and saying, I need to take some time out because my son's ill, or I need to take some time out because my son's going to be in an event. And it just never crossed my mind that that was something I could do. I didn't know how to ask for help and support. I didn't want to be seen as weak because I didn't want to give anyone any ammunition. And these are all things in hindsight I realised it was because I was trying to fit into an environment that was not necessarily set up for someone dealing with the things I was having to deal with. And this is way before menopause came along, but ultimately it's all part and parcel of the same thing.
So you mentioned people don't understand the difference between menopause and perimenopause. I'm not sure I do. What is the difference? I mean, tell me.
Sure, of course. So it's interesting because quite often women will get in touch and say, oh, I'm premenopause and I can't cope. And I'm going, you're premenopause and you can't cope. It's not my bag. Premenopause is when you become an adolescent, your monthly cycle starts, and you just have whatever is your normal, whatever that is for you, is when you're premenopausal. When your monthly cycle starts to change a little bit, might become heavier or lighter, might be longer or shorter in between bleeds, and you may start experiencing symptoms like brain fog, anxiety, sleeplessness, achy joints, and so on. That's when you're entering perimenopause. It's when your estrogen levels are starting to kind of fluctuate. Your progesterone levels are declining. And when you become menopausal, you've gone 12 months without a cycle. And thereafter, literally, menopause is like a 12-month anniversary of your last monthly cycle, and then you're postmenopausal. Does that help?
Okay, so that's the 12-month window, and you've no idea during that 12 months if it's going to reset in 2 months' time. So
correct.
So you could be exhibiting these intermittent periods, and that's where you're perimenopausal, where you're going through those last couple of years of your periods in the cycle, and then you say one day you wake up and go, "Oh, 5th of December, that's it.
We're done. Woohoo!
Yeah, we're done. We're now postmenopausal. Yay!" Yeah. So menopause days really was one day.
Yep,
in your life.
That's exactly right. Yes, but I think because you don't want to go around going, peri to postmenopausal journey, you just go menopause, and that means everything from peri through to post.
It's the big umbrella term that everyone kind of understands.
Yeah, that's right.
And I assume that there are many women going through a similar pattern to where you went through, where you're using contraception, risk masks periods, where you're taking them every day of the month. So there are many women out there that are probably not aware. And also, I suppose most contraceptive pills give you estrogen and probably progesterone at similar levels to what you're naturally assuming. So you probably don't notice some of this tailing off, do you?
No, if you're on certainly certain types of contraception, you're not going to know. There's just no way to know unless you came off the contraception. So you really go by your symptoms. And if you are in your early to mid 40s up to your mid 50s and you're starting to experiencing your anxiety, brain fog, sleeplessness, palpitations, itchy skin, hair loss, hair growth, tweezers can become a girl's best friend, and all these kind of other low moods, night sweats. If you're starting to experience these symptoms, then that's your guide, really. Especially if you're over 45, then that is just like going through adolescence. When you go through adolescence, you may experience mood swings, slamming doors, different changing sleep patterns, all sorts of different things. It's just we don't expect that in women of a certain stage. So
you must assume that women have kind of got their life together by that point, and they should be just flat, normal, whereas they're almost going back to those early hormonal years where their emotions are going up and down quite considerably, I suppose.
It's one of the most common issues that women tell me about when I'm working with them, that they've had this kind of cycle of behavior at work. They know when they're more analytical or creative through their monthly cycle, where they're more reflective or determined, and then all of a sudden perimenopause comes along, and the moods can be, they can be quite severe. And from one moment to the next, you can go from being happy as Larry to being in fits of tears for no apparent reason, and things will trigger you in a way that you just aren't used to. And then all of a sudden, you could be raging at somebody. Now, this isn't for all women, clearly, but it is not uncommon behavior for someone going through menopause.
It's interesting you mentioned one of your symptoms was memory loss as well, or just forgetfulness. And I've come across people in my life where that's been a factor, and that just assumed that it was just, as you say, early onset dementia, a senior moment, as people would call it, but maybe never associating it with the fact it could have been sort of perimenopause causing this.
Mm-hmm. And what sort of ages would people that you've noticed that in be?
I would say late 40s, 50s, kind of that kind of age, but people just talk about it and say, I just almost like it's on the tip of my tongue, but they just couldn't get it out, or you have a conversation and they say, I don't remember saying that, and it's like, you just said that. No, I didn't. So maybe it is kind of like that. Yeah,
exactly. And I had a classic one time to work the hours I was working and the type of position I was. I had to have support with my son, so I had a nanny. And one night I came home, I drove back, 45-minute journey from work to the house, dropped my suitcase off, my briefcase off, said hi to my son, walked back to my nanny, picked up my briefcase and said, I'll see you later. And she goes, where are you going? I said, I'm going to work. She goes, you've just come home from work. I mean, it's the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing.
So it could also manifest itself where someone's maybe an administrator and they're doing a routine process and they keep missing bits of the process, or they just don't retain some of the process and go, what do you mean? I thought I'd done that. That could be part of that as well.
It's exactly that. So people may experience those kind of small errors in their work, specifically if they're doing detailed work. And that's why it's so important for employers to become educated and for women to really understand what they're going through so that they can start to put their own processes in place, so that they can have checklists, so they can set timers, so they can record meetings, so they can take more frequent breaks, so they can do the relaxation exercises. Because it's important as an employee that you take responsibility for yourself and do everything you can to thrive, as well as the employer obviously making the cultural changes and environmental changes that are needed.
So you weren't really self-aware of what was going on, and I'm guessing that other people maybe listening to this and experiencing this probably aren't self-aware either. It's only when people maybe mention it to them that they go, oh, maybe you're right. But I suppose if you're forgetful, you don't realise you're being forgetful.
Not until you kind of put the car keys in the fridge and the milk in the, I don't know, washing machine or something like that, which, as odd as it might sound, is not that uncommon. But I think quite often people, especially in the workplace, people will notice your behaviour changing before you're conscious of it. And it's about learning how to identify that, how to open a sensitive conversation with somebody, how to signpost them to the right help and support in a supportive, caring way without them feeling threatened. And I often find when I'm speaking to women, like, oh, I didn't know that was part of menopause, because there's over 30 symptoms and no two women experiences it in the same way. So it fascinates me, and it shouldn't, because I was there only 6 years ago, but it fascinates me that women don't know what menopause is. They don't know how many symptoms there are. They're not prepared for it, and they don't know where to get help and support. So, yeah, I'm really grateful to you for helping me open up the conversation that little bit further.
Yeah, isn't it? My understanding is that there's still a lot of kind of shame and stigma around losing one's fertility and getting to this point in life, maybe the feeling of loss, whilst someone may not ever want to have another child, but the fact they now can't is quite a big loss, isn't it?
I've had a few clients mention that to me, and I do a lot of work on mindset with my clients, so it's very much looking deeper inside to them and what that fertility means to them, looking at the ages and stages of life. And actually, women of this generation experiencing menopause are going to live as long, if not longer, post-menopausally than they were in their fertile years. And we are the first generation to do that. And that in itself, when people get their heads around that and they recognize that they've got this incredible life ahead of them still, it's like the second opportunity to create whatever you want to be and do and have. And it's very much about, that mindset shift and recognizing your role in life also, and how much you've got to give back. So yeah, there can be that sense of loss, but it affects everybody differently.
But there's still a lot of social etiquette where periods, cycles, sanitary products, etc., aren't topics for the dinner table. They're whisper conversations, and it's not talked about. So is it any wonder that many women don't share their stories with? Well, I suppose it's not seen as polite conversation, is it? So is that part of the trouble, that people aren't talking about it enough?
I'm delighted to say that things are changing. Did you see the article about Scotland and sanitary products?
Yes, I did. I thought it was fantastic. Yeah.
I just hope that is the beginning of something that more and more countries will do. So free sanitary products is one amazingly positive stride forward. And the more clients I work with now, the more corporate clients that I engage with, instead of just focusing on menopause, what we do is we look at the entire female life cycle. So everything, all the changes, fertility issues, miscarriage, pregnancy, we're looking at anybody who bleeds and what that's going to mean for them, the impact it's going to have for them throughout their entire employee journey, rather than just focusing on one specific stage. Because I believe that the more we can open the conversation at work about what's going on that you can't see necessarily, the more we can create an environment that people are more engaged with, more tolerant of, and more understanding of as well. So I do think it's a big journey, but I am seeing people being much more open now. 6 years ago, organizations were kind of like taking 9 to 12 months before they would engage me to come in and deliver something on menopause awareness, whereas now it's inbound inquiries asking me to go and help them create their strategy around women at work. So there is a shift, but there's always going to be businesses, and you must find this with your work as well. There's always companies that are, the early adopters, and there's ones that will kind of lag behind a little bit more. Do you find that?
Oh, for sure. It depends on the size of the business, the sector, the culture. Some are front runners out there trying to strive to do their best, and there are many organisations that are just playing catch up, or it's not even on the radar. So yeah, you're right. I think in a way it's just the way of the world. I think you're always going to have outliers, forward people, And I think in a way it needs the front runners to set the examples and to break the ground and to show people what's possible that other people can aspire to and catch up. So I think whilst I'm often disappointed that all companies don't focus on diversity inclusion and helping their people in this way, it's becoming the way organisations start to think, which is for me, I think we are making progress.
Yeah, no, I am definitely seeing a difference. And certainly this time this year, especially given that we're recording this a time when COVID is still very much in our midst, I have noticed that there are more organisations asking to engage early next year to look at what their strategy is going to be and how they're going to put menopause on the table, on the agenda, and bring it to the attention of the senior stakeholders. So I'm really, really excited about that.
I think I've seen that as well. So I don't know whether it was COVID or Black Lives Matter or something earlier this year created this bow wave of change or enlightenment. And I think you're right. Many D&I leads and D&I teams are starting to pull together a program of events around inclusion and identities and needs. And menopause is on that list in the same way that racial inclusion, trans, LGBT, all these kind of the big ticket items are on the list now. And I think I spoke to someone this morning, and they're doing something very similar. They want to really raise their profile. We were talking specifically around LGBT, but they're also doing a number of other events in a similar line. So it's fantastic that you're already seeing that in 2021 as on the agenda.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And before March 20, I was doing a lot of work in the States. However, the time I've saved by flying back and forth between the States and the UK, I've been doing far more webinars and reaching out to far more organizations, much bigger, more global organizations. And, I've spoken to companies now that have got a footprint in Russia to Romania, Israel to Ireland, Australia to Austria and beyond. It's been phenomenal this year to really see that reach grow. So I think that's really helped. And also with the flexibility and agility and the ways of working that people have had to do, it's opened the doors to completely new thinking about what work means and ways of working going forward. So I think we've touched on that a couple of times when we've spoken.
Yeah.
So
because you've also got a very active Facebook group, haven't you, where you support a network for women going through perimenopause, menopause,
yes.
And you've had some guest speakers, and I've watched some of the webinars you've done, which have been really, really enlightening and surprising. The lack of information that's out there without diving in. If I hadn't have met you, hadn't been on your webinars or been in a Facebook group, I would never have known half of this.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you had seen some of them.
You invited me into the group because
I did.
and I looked through them because whilst it doesn't affect me directly, hormones do. So if I stop taking hormones, I will go probably through a similar sort of cold turkey experience. So I'm very hyper aware of what hormones have done to me over the last 5 years, and the changes that I've experienced as a result, not just physically but mentally. And the mental changes have been, I would put it most welcome, because they have introduced a calmness and a way of thinking that I never had before. So I can imagine if I ended up in a situation where my hormone levels fluctuated wildly, to have that cycle between complete euphoric calmness and not would be. I'm not sure I can imagine how that would be.
Yeah, and I think so I'm delighted that you've seen the webinars, and you're right about that hormonal fluctuation. The other thing that women maybe don't recognize in themselves is that they have testosterone. So it's like the third hormone that can drop and diminish. And that's quite often women will comment about loss of libido, loss of confidence, loss of self-esteem. And that can all be tied into a drop in testosterone, because whilst we have much lower levels in men, we still have testosterone, and it's really important hormone for us. So it's something that's not licensed for use in the UK. However, it can be prescribed. So it's something for women to be aware of if they are talking to their doctor about hormone replacement therapy. But just going back to the comment you made about the webinars, I have in my team, I have a GP who specializes in women's health. I have an amazing guy who I've known for 20 years who specializes in CV confidence and coaching, CV career and confidence coaching, because quite often going through menopause is when women really start thinking about a change in their career. I've got a hypnotherapist that specialises in stress and anxiety, because that's way up on people's list with menopause. And I've got a bunch of fitness professionals, nutritional professionals, and myself, obviously, as the executive coach. And it just means that people have got a one-stop shop for all the types of support that they might need throughout menopause. And that's what's come out of working with women and working with organisations over the last 6-7 years, just to make sure that people have got the right support, the right access, the right information. And the webinars that you mentioned, I do every few weeks, and they're free. They're in the group. Anyone, is welcome to access them, because for me, it's all about increasing people's awareness. If we don't share the information and people live in ignorance, then that's not going to move us forward. So that's just me doing my bit, really.
Let's be clear to anyone who's listening, these aren't just for women concerned about the menopause themselves, whether they think they're going through perimenopause or postmenopausal. This could be for women younger to try and identify and educate themselves for later life, but also for men who want to find out how they can support women better in the workplace. And it's not a taboo subject. We want men to listen to these to understand how they can help better, don't we? Whether that's as a husband, as a partner, as a son, or as a brother or sister. Sorry, brother or father. So it's important that men educate themselves, and it's not seen as a woman's only thing to talk about. It's a societal challenge that we all need to embrace, isn't it?
It is, and I think a really great way to bring that to life is an old friend of mine who, he won't appreciate being called an old friend, but a long-term friend of mine who lives overseas. When I got pregnant with my son, he moved overseas, got married, built a house, living the life of Riley with his new wife, and they both had ideal jobs. They had their swimming pool in the back garden, and for 10 years, I just got great reports of how wonderful everything was. And 3, maybe 4 years ago, he popped back over. He was back over in the UK to spread his mum's ashes, and he told me he was getting divorced. And I was really, really upset for him, because he was leading such an incredible life. Anyway, he had to go back home to sort things out, put the house on the market, put notice in at work. His wife was off long-term sick. And I was helping him sort out, a new network back over in Bristol in the UK, find a house to live in. So he put an offer in a house. He'd started going for job interviews. And as I was talking to him one day, he was just talking in the most beautiful way about his wife. And I turned around and I said, look, forgive me, but confused.com over here, you're talking about your wife as if she's your best friend, as if you really love her. And he goes, well, I do, and she is. I was like, I really don't understand why you're coming back to the UK. And he turned around and he said to me, we haven't been intimate for 4 years. I've tried everything. And I just can't live like that. I don't want to cheat, but I can't live like this either. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, we had some chats. I realised that his wife was perimenopausal and really struggling. She had really severe symptoms like I had, but perhaps even more so. And with a little bit of coaching, a little bit of counselling, and some intervention, some medical intervention as well, they stayed together. However, there were 2 employers in their home country that had one employee that had left work, male, one that was on long-term sick, female, an employer over in the UK that thought they had a new male employee coming over that wasn't, solicitors for the house selling and the house buying on both sides, solicitors for the divorce, all because a couple were not menopause savvy and didn't understand how to communicate with each other and where to go and get help and support. So it's not a women's only issue. This affects employers even when they don't see that the person being impacted is being directly impacted by menopause. So for me, that story is a really good one to demonstrate how far-reaching menopause is and the effects are. Because the more we recognise it, the more we understand it, we can put the right help and support in place and just all get on with our lives.
So you're telling me earlier that you went to Iceland.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. I was in Iceland in 98, 99. So that was 20 years ago.
Mm.
And I loved it over there. We did the locals tour, because we actually were there as part of a club, and we we were being hosted by some Icelanders, and we enjoyed a lot of their spirit. So it wasn't like a tourist. We weren't being on a bus or anything. We didn't just see the big ticket items, the glaciers and the geysers things. We actually sort of lived with them. We were experiencing some of their culture, which was incredible. But no, I loved it. It's a really great place, and I really want to go back there. But one of the things that sticks in my mind was they hired this fishing trawler, and in the middle of this was in May, so it was kind of still pretty dark and pretty cold and horrible out there. And they set the sail in this fishing trawler, and it literally threw the net over the back, trawled up, I think, stuff off the bottom, and there was urchins, there was clams, and things like this, and they were literally just opening up these urchins, and we were eating them off the knife.
Wow.
And the scallops and the clams and things were just literally eating them off the knife as they were bringing them up from the floor. And then we had this massive buffet, and one of the delicacies on there was puffin. I don't know how many puffins gave up their life for this buffet, but there was like trays and trays of puffin, and yeah, it was an incredible experience. And the way they prepare lamb, it's more like we would prepare steak. And it was the way they serve it is like absolutely beautiful. So yeah, I've got some really, really fond memories. But yeah, I'm afraid I did consume a fair few puffin that week.
Well, my biggest learning was don't go to Iceland on Christmas because everything is shut. Christmas Day and Boxing Day, everything, even the restaurants and the hotels are shut. So it's a very interesting time. But we were the ultimate tourists and had completely the opposite experience. But it was just the most stunning, beautiful. They're the most welcoming, gorgeous people I think I've ever met. My son can't wait to go back. So one day when we can, we will go back. But it's beautiful, beautiful location. It's simply stunning.
Yeah, we went skidooing on the glaciers, and that was absolutely. I mean, I've only ever skidooed once. I'd never ridden a motorcycle before, and just being let loose on this thing and just running around the glaciers and then being shouted at because we would be aware of these crevices and cracks and faults in the snow in case you just went straight through them. So you had to keep on this very, very narrow single file path, because every time the leader looked the other way, everyone was five abreast racing each other down the mountain. It's an incredible experience, incredible. And I remember getting off this skidoo on the top of this glacier, and it was literally white below the horizon and blue. And it was that really gorgeous blue, not a cloud, not anything, just white and blue. And I took one step off the skidoo, and I went up to my thighs in snow, where the snow was so unpacked. And I was literally, I went to my thighs and thought, how do I get out from here? One of my friends, who was really, really kind of lightweight, he got off his skidoo and he was walking on the snow. It was like incredible, the difference between someone who was a little bit weightier and someone who was really light, who was able to walk on. But yeah, such happy memories of sliding down glaciers on inner tubes. Big donut inner tube things. Yeah, it's a fantastic place, isn't it?
Oh, it's
the
stunning.
geysers, the culture.
It was just the ticket for me to wake up and smell the roses.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it's a bit of a digital detox, I thought, when you were over there.
Oh, it was phenomenal. Well. It was just the antidote to what I was going through. And it was just that moment of realization when I sat up in bed that night and went, oh yeah, that's what he was trying to tell me. It was like a real wake-up call.
It comes on slowly, doesn't it? I mean, we talked about this. You don't know it's happening, but it's so gradual, I guess, where over the course of many, many years, the decline is probably happening, isn't it? So you don't realise.
I think it's different for everybody, and 25% of women will have quite severe symptoms if they're not prepared for it and don't know where to get help and support, like I did. And 55% will have mild to moderate that will need some sort of intervention, even if it's just lifestyle changes. And 20% of women will sail through. However, if you have an oophorectomy, hysterectomy, if you have certain cancer treatments, certainly in the pelvic region with chemotherapy, then you would go into an instant medical or surgical menopause as well. And a lot of women describe that as being hit like a truck. So for them, obviously that happens at whatever age their treatments or surgery happens. And that can be a lot younger. Menopause itself, actually, I mean, I was under 40 when I went through it. And the youngest recorded case was 12. So it's, you need to be quite open-minded and just, we need, thankfully, menopause is now on the education curriculum. So at least it'll start to get talked about at school. And that's where it belongs, because we need to know about it from the get-go so we can plan for it and recognise it.
So is it a myth that you have to have HRT? Is that a myth, you have to have it, or is it not appropriate for everybody?
So HRT, so I'm speaking as a layperson, albeit a very well-educated layperson, and I'm doing yet another course in HRT at the moment. So HRT, if you're under, the NICE guidelines are, if you're under 45, you should be on HRT at least until you're 51, because your body's not intended not to have the estrogen in it. Estrogen's got really strong preventative bone and heart health implications, and that's why men and women will take it even if they don't have the menopausal symptoms. They will take it throughout their entire life. However, because HRT got such a bad rep with some now, there was a study 18 years ago where there were links between DVT, breast cancer, and HRT. And as that study has been discredited, but there have been other ones that have popped their heads up, but they haven't been based on the type of HRT that's available now. They haven't been based on cohorts where they are the ideal cohorts. I mean, a lot of women who've been studied who were over 60 or severely overweight, obese, and they would be normally contraindicated for HRT in the first place. So that's not where you would start off when you were doing a clean study. So there's a big swathe of GPs now beginning to get educated on HRT, learning what it's for, why it's important. And as I said earlier, because we're living longer and later into life, if we want to be really active, cognitively and physically active, and we want our heart rate to be everything to function normally, then HRT is definitely a consideration. But there's, it's personal choice, and it will be based on your own personal choice and personal medical history as well.
As you say, things like osteoporosis, bone cancer, calcium, those sort of things. As you say, estrogen or lack of estrogen is one of the causes or the start of osteoporosis setting in, isn't it? Where bone density increase of breakages or brittle bones, etc., etc. So, yeah. But I'd heard all about this DVT, blood clots, the worry around, certainly when they talk about trans healthcare, the risks of estrogen, and also the fact that if you take it in tablet form, the liver, it gets metabolized in the liver and can cause liver problems, which is why they often prefer patches or creams or topical. See, I'm quite researched on all these hormones.
I would hope so.
I'm an educated patient myself, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people don't even realise that HRT comes in, an IUD. It comes in sprays, pumps, gels, patches, tablets. People don't know you can have separate prescriptions or combined prescriptions.
Pessaries,
Yep, you name it. So, and then the other thing. Well, yes, there's all sorts that it's really important to, before you go to GP, because our GPs generally are not educated on HRT. They're generally not educated on menopause. From if they have half an hour to 5 hours worth of training in their 10 years of training, they're doing well unless they've shown an interest in it. So it's really important to find someone who's knowledgeable, but still make sure you keep a list of your symptoms and make sure that you are read up on HRT through the NICE guidelines and clear on what conversation you want to have with your GP, and be prepared to have 2 or 3 conversations with them before you reach a conclusion as well. Just be patient and be prepared to educate your GP to help you. So it's important.
Yeah, I've certainly found that you need to be a kind of an educated patient, know what you're trying to achieve. And I'm not saying we want to be a Google hypochondriac or Google expert, but certainly do the research yourself. Join forums such as yours, go into Facebook groups, go into other internet resources, and learn about other people's lived experience. And then go to your GP knowing a bit more about you than they do, and help them. I mean, I certainly found that if I go to my GP educated, I get a far better outcome.
Yeah, and I think specifically with the menopause, excuse expression, but a lot of the online fora can be very bitch and moan. And I'm afraid I don't tolerate in mine. In the menopause social hangout, what are you experiencing? What are your options? What are the positives? How can we move forward? And as I've said, you've experienced some of the quality of the people I've got in there to help support everybody who are educated and do know their topic really, really well. it's important to stick. I mean, Dr. Google can be phenomenally dangerous and very worrying. So I highly recommend people stick to trusted resources like the NICE guidelines and the bms.org.uk, which are the kind of go-to sites for people who want to be well researched, well read, and really get
lots of good info on the nhs.co.uk site as well as now.
Which one was that? Sorry?
On the NHS website itself, there's a lot of good resources on there. So
yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. But yeah, hormones in themselves, we could talk about for hours because they have such a massive role in our bodies, and they're happening, they're going on, they're going up and down and fluctuating and doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things to keep us going. And the more we understand how we function, the more control we can have over that. But equally, from an employer, going back to the workplace, from an employer's point of view, if they can embrace the fact that hormones play a big role in people's lives and that can be to their benefit as much as anything else, then we can start to see people really thriving and doing work, being super creative, super analytical, super, just amazing at what they do by embracing the cycles and the changes that they go through monthly and throughout their entire life.
Yeah, and likewise, testosterone is also a hormone. You say women have it in smaller quantities, but also understanding about the male cycle of testosterone increase in the mid to late teens and through into the early 20s is an extremely powerful hormone in its own right as well, changing brain behavior and personalities as well. So yeah, it's, I guess, every one of us is touched by hormones in some way. And I think is it the ovaries produce the testosterone in a female body, which is then converted to estrogen, isn't it? And
I was just as you were talking, I was just slightly giggling to myself because I've got a 14-year-old in the house at the moment, 14-year-old boy, and we've had some very fascinating conversations. So far, I think I'm getting off very lightly as a parent, but we shall see what's around the corner.
It's when the musk and the odor develops. You're right at that stage.
Yeah,
the teenage boy smell. Yeah,
the Sundays are carte blanche. You're not allowed to do anything on screens until you've done your bedroom, and that involves thoroughly doing your floors and thoroughly changing your bed linen. So that's paramount.
I've got a recollection of our son going through that phase, and it made me wonder if I ever remembered smelling that myself. I suppose when you're living with those hormones, you can't smell yourself, can you, or your own musk? So yeah, it's.
I run out the door with the deodorant or the perspiration, whatever it's called, the stuff that they use, and so no, I don't think you've put your antiperspirant on today yet. Just want to take that with you today. You might want to put some on at lunchtime.
Top up. Have a top up. Yeah.
Oh, some of the conversations are hysterical, but. Hormones are so important to understand. And when you can embrace that for yourself, you can just up your productivity in every aspect of your life. So really super important.
They have a huge impact on your mental well-being, mental health, even how you think and some of your inhibitions and inhibitions. They do. I often think that they remote control you sometimes. They can take over your life. And as you say, the experience you had 6 or 7 years ago where you realised that the lack of hormones or the disruption to your hormones had a real impact on your cognitive function, if you like, your ability to be who you were.
Yeah.
Yeah, really fascinating.
And because one of the things that was always stood out, I think one of the first times we spoke was how you described that sense of calm when you started going through your hormone regime and the kind of switch that brought for you, which I think you said was quite welcome. Would that be?
Oh, yeah. It was like I had someone else driving my body before. There was another voice in my head that shouted louder than everything else. And I think once I removed testosterone and increased estrogen, I realized that really shut down that extra voice that was unwelcome, that's been unwelcome in my head for years, controlled actions that I was ashamed of or disappointed with myself, and allowed me to have control of my body and my thoughts for once. And so, yeah, it was a real. I often describe that I went from being two people in my head to being one person, and it fundamentally changed. I mean, apart from my gender transition, the fundamental thing was the complete reduction of testosterone and the the overriding introduction of estrogen. That was, you can only explain, I think, what happened to my head, my mind, the way I felt, the way I experienced the world, based on that significant change. I don't think the social element would have had the same impact. I feel so calm, so relaxed, so unified in who I am. Something I'd never felt for the previous 50 odd years of my life.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I identify as a trans woman, as you know, but we've also got to recognise that there are trans men out there who are also on a similar journey. Just because someone's trans doesn't mean to say they don't have the menopause, they don't have a monthly cycle, they don't have periods, And if we're being very 21st century about this, men can have periods, men can have cycles, men can have menopause, where they were assigned female at birth. So we have to also recognise that someone in your organisation who you may know, who is a man, may actually have, may be trans, and may also have these underlying conditions as they grow older. So, yeah, it's not all straightforward.
No. And I think that's one of the interesting things now. So I have some clients who no longer have male and female toilets. They have gender neutral toilets. So one of the very first questions I ask an organisation is, what pronouns do you use? What's the education level like in the organisation? And I always ask them, are you comfortable with me using woman to cover all people who were assigned female at birth, who may have a monthly cycle, who may bleed? And we just talk through what that means and who that includes as well. And quite often it's an eye-opener for them, because it's not something they've really thought about before. But I'm always really clear that when I'm using terminology, what I'm actually covering when I'm referring to that terminology as well. So I think that's a big part of the awakening and the inclusion of, what I'm trying to put over to people, what I'm trying to get people to understand. And typically, clearly your typical female audience get it, they understand it, they feel relieved that someone's actually talking about it. And that's for the kind of en masse. However, I always find it fascinating because it's usually their partners and managers that come up to me afterwards and go, oh my goodness, I am so pleased to learn about this, or I didn't know that there were 34 symptoms. Or the one that always touches my heart the most is when I get someone come up to me and say to me, I think you might just have saved my marriage. And that is one of, especially with the story of my friend overseas, when I get a man coming up to me at the end and saying, I think you might have just saved my marriage, it's just like, blimey, why do we not know about this stuff? It's so basic. It's so simple. And it's so easy to learn about and do something about and talk about. But it's just having that confidence to say the word menopause out loud and to stand behind it. And I don't know how, when you were going through your journey, did you find that your own posture and position changed when you were interacting with other people?
Yeah, I guess it did, in terms of my femininity and masculinity is.
I think so. I'm thinking about when I would go to business breakfast and be one of few women there. When I went out on this part of my journey, I'd walk up and introduce myself as an executive health coach who helped women in midlife. Whereas now I walk up and go, hi, I'm Lauren Churn. I specialise in supporting organisations become menopause aware. And as my posture has changed, I realised that how I behave has a very big impact on the people I'm interacting with. So the more confident I am, the more sure of my topic, the easier it is for the messaging to land with other people.
I suppose in a similar way, that because I have a level of confidence and self-belief, and I believe I'm accepted more because I'm sure of who I am, and I'm confident about talking about things, and I get engaged in conversations that are positive most often, because I'm not shying away from who I am or what I'm talking about. So maybe I think. I think, as you said at the beginning, your mission is to try and make talk about menopause a comfortable conversation rather than an uncomfortable or a non-conversation. So I think I do the same around transgender knowledge and people, and just trying to raise awareness so that it's a topic that you're having, it's a conversation you're having rather than ignoring. And so I think, in the same way you're creating positive conversations, I'd like to think I am as well. Or at least when I run training sessions, I often say, how many people in this training session know someone who's in this close circle as trans, gender diverse, gender queer, either themselves, their family, their friends, or their work colleagues? And often it's kind of 30% do, 70% don't.
Mm-hmm.
And they're quite relieved afterwards because I say, well, now you know me, you can all tick yes next time. Sort of thing. So, but I often meet people when I'm out talking, training, even online, where someone in their life is gender diverse in some way. If not them, then their cousin or a friend of a friend's daughter or son or a friend of a friend's partner transitioned, etc. So I don't think we're more than 1 or 2 degrees away from someone who's trans or gender diverse. And so the conversations are becoming more and more welcome. I get more and more messages on LinkedIn. I've had quite a few, actually. I've had quite a few messages on LinkedIn from fathers who saw the documentary I took part in and thanked me for creating that conversation in their family. So I think if all we do is allow people to have a conversation and to start that process, that's the best bit. That for me, that inspires me. Okay, we could do more, but that is a really great first step to have that conversation and to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I just love when one of my classics when I walk away from an event is to turn around and go, right, repeat after me, menopause. And I'll repeat that 3 times, just getting people to say the word out loud 3 times. And it's just phenomenal when the whole room or, on screen, suddenly you just hear everyone take themselves off mute and go, menopause, and then invite them to do it every day for 21 days till it just becomes normal. And, it's just a quirky little thing that I do, but the more we can stand in our power and the more we can encourage other people to stand in their power and be more open and more accepting, I just believe will create such a happier, more content world. It sounds a little bit grand, but it's so important.
Well, I certainly learned today the difference between premenopausal, perimenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal. And that the word menopause really is a kind of a one-day event that you go, yay, it's been a year.
That's it.
And up to that point, it's perimenopause. After that point, it's postmenopausal. And before perimenopausal, what you're saying is basically you're i.e., you're in the prime of your life. You're growing up, becoming more mature, and that's typical for you. And it's only when the hormone levels start dropping and your monthly cycle, your periods stop for a period of 12 months, that's when the menopause kicks in. So if nothing else, I've learned a lot. And I was a little bit educated before, but I feel like I've now got that key facts in my head. And also I'm more aware, just having spoken to you about these, 34 signs of the perimenopause and the symptoms that go on, that I'm more aware now of when I meet people. I even think back in people I've known over the last 5-10 years, where I'm now thinking maybe that was a factor. It's certainly in relationship breakdowns. I'm hyper aware relationships have broken down. Some of my friends have divorced. And I'm actually wondering whether this could have been an impact as well.
Yeah, I don't want to close out in negative stats, but the average age of menopause is 51, which is the same as the average age of women attempting to take their own lives. There's a spike in women leaving work, age 45 to 55, the average age of menopause, and a spike in divorce, age 45 to 55. So I don't think there is some research going on into this at the moment, but I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to put the things together to realize that hormones have got a big role to play. So like anything in life, when you understand it and you accept it and you know what to do about it, then you are in a much more harmonious space. And the help and support is all out there. It's just learning how to access it and knowing where to go to get signposted. So thank you so much.
That's the positive thing. So how do people get hold of you? So you've got, as we talked about the Facebook group, you've got a website. So I'm sure that people are going to want to make contact with you after listening to this. So tell us how.
I'll keep it really simple. Just contact me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to get hold of me. And my website is womenofacertainstage.com. I am notoriously bad at admin, so I'm not one of these people that's got this always singing, dancing, up-to-date website. if you want to see what I'm up to and you want to learn more about menopause, definitely join me on LinkedIn. You'll hear about everything I'm up to, all that I'm doing, and I'm always really super keen to open a conversation and see how I can help and support.
And for sure, share this podcast, share some of the webinars you've done before, etc., etc. And I suppose if you're in an organisation, have a chat with you, see if you can do a talk or come in and advise, etc., etc. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And if anyone is struggling themselves, give me a shout. If I can't help, I will know someone that can. So whether it's personal or professional, I can definitely get you on the right road.
Fantastic. Well, I'm inspired, and there's loads to ponder there, and I'm sure the listeners, anyone tuning in, will have there's a fantastic resource there. So a huge thank you.
Thank you so much.
For your time today, Lauren. And a huge thank you to the listeners. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to the end. Please do subscribe to keep updated on future episodes of the Inclusion Bites podcast. That's BITES. Please tell your friends. Please tell your colleagues. Please do share this. I have a number of other exciting guests lined up that I'm sure you'll be also inspired by over the next few weeks and months. And don't forget, if you'd like to be a guest on the show, let me know. Drop me an email. If you've got any feedback, suggestions, or any other comments you'd like to make to improve the show, again, let me know. So just drop me a line to joe.lockwood@teachingchapman.co.uk. That's jo.lockwood@teachingchapman.co.uk. So finally, my name is Joanne Lockwood, and it's been an absolute pleasure to host this podcast for you today. Catch you next time. Bye.